It was a tropical evening in Singapore, the sky heavily overcast, and the humid air carried the scent of an impending downpour. Mei Ling, barely 18, was perched on a wooden bench at a bus stop along a bustling thoroughfare near Clark Quay. A well-worn canvas backpack rested at her feet, her dark hair swept into a casual knot, and earbuds nestled in her ears, though the music barely hummed, as if her thoughts were miles away. She had completed her secondary education months ago and, adrift, had decided to spend a few days in the city-state, searching for something she couldn't quite articulate. Perhaps it was liberation, perhaps just a brief reprieve from the monotony of her heartland estate. The bus destined for her shophouse guesthouse was already half an hour behind schedule. Mei Ling drummed her fingers against her thigh, glancing at the sparse pedestrians who were already unfurling their umbrellas. The first tentative drops of rain began to speckle the tarmac. She sighed, pulling out an earbud. "Just what I needed," she muttered, glaring at the sky as if to chide it. Beside her, at the other end of the bench, an elderly gentleman, perhaps 62, observed the scene with serene composure. His silver hair was neatly combed back, and a trim beard lent him an air of quiet sophistication, despite his simple attire, a light linen shirt and dark trousers. In his hands, he cradled an aged book with yellowed pages, yet his eyes, a deep, contemplative gray, seemed lost in distant reflections rather than reading. Mei Ling had noticed him when she sat down, but paid him little mind. He was just another senior waiting for the same bus, or so she assumed. The rain began to intensify, the bus shelter's canopy offering scant protection. Mei Ling pulled up the hood of her jacket, but the downpour was already soaking her jeans. The man slowly closed his book and rose, peering out at the deserted street. "This bus won't be arriving," he stated, his voice low but gentle, as though speaking more to himself than to her. Mei Ling looked at him, surprised he had addressed her. Removing her other earbud, she frowned. "How do you know?" she asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and caution. The gentleman gestured to a half-erased sign at the stop. "Service suspended due to track maintenance," it read in small print. Mei Ling squinted, leaning closer to discern the words through the rain. "You've got to be kidding me," she exclaimed, then quickly covered her mouth, embarrassed by her outburst. The man let out a soft, almost imperceptible chuckle. "Don't worry. You're not the first to get frustrated with our public transport system," he said, tucking his book into a canvas tote slung over his shoulder. "If you'd like, there's a cozy kopitiam 2 streets away where we can shelter until the storm passes." Mei Ling scrutinized him, her gaze wary. She wasn't one to trust strangers, especially a man thrice her age, but the rain showed no signs of abating, and the prospect of remaining drenched and stranded was far from appealing. "And who are you?" she challenged, crossing her arms. "Mr. Chen?" he replied with a smile that crinkled the lines around his eyes. "Just another fellow passenger left in the lurch, eager to avoid catching a chill. And you?" "Mei Ling," she offered after a pause, still hesitant. "All right. But just so you know, I have pepper spray in my backpack." Mr. Chen raised an eyebrow, amused. "Duly noted. I shall endeavor not to provoke any chemical attack. Come, it's not far." They walked through the now heavy rain, sharing the small umbrella Mr. Chen produced from his bag. Mei Ling maintained a careful distance, yet couldn't help but steal glances at him. There was something in his measured yet confident gait that intrigued her. He wasn't the typical elderly gentleman one might expect to encounter at a bus stop. His hands, though marked by time, appeared strong, and his gaze held a spark that belied his age. They arrived at a modest kopitiam, its windows misted over, a fluorescent sign flickering above the entrance. Inside, the atmosphere was warm, fragrant with the aroma of strong coffee and the faint dampness of wood. They settled at a table near the window, where the rain pattered against the glass with a hypnotic rhythm. Mei Ling ordered an iced teh-si, Mr. Chen a kopio. "You don't seem like you're from the city center," he remarked, stirring his coffee. You have that air of someone searching for something, yet unsure of what it is. Mei Ling shrugged, idly twisting the straw in her drink. I'm just passing through. I wanted to see Singapore, experience a change of scenery. Nothing ever happens in my heartland estate, you know? It's always the same. Mr. Chen nodded, as if comprehending more than she articulated. Singapore has that allure. It can captivate you, make you think. But it can also leave you feeling lost if you don't know where to look. She regarded him, slightly taken aback by his tone. There was something in his words, a blend of experience and melancholy, that made her yearn to know more. And what are you doing here? Waiting for a bus that never arrives? She inquired, resting her chin in her hand. Mr. Chen smiled, but this time, the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Let's just say I'm also passing through, though at my age, passing through takes on a different meaning. Sometimes I simply seek a place to sit, to read, or to reflect. Mei Ling furrowed her brow, intrigued. She wanted to press further, but something in the way he averted his gaze told her it wasn't the opportune moment. The server passed by their table, leaving a small dish of kacang putih that neither touched. The rain continued to fall, and the kopitiam gradually filled with the murmurs of other patrons seeking refuge. Mei Ling felt a shiver, not from the chill, but from the peculiar sensation of being there with a stranger who didn't feel entirely unfamiliar. There was something in Mr. Chen's composure, in the way he listened without judgment, that made her feel truly seen. Do you always speak like that, as if you know things others don't? She asked, half joking, half serious. Mr. Chen laughed, a genuine hearty sound this time. Only when it's raining, and I'm trapped with someone who seems to have more questions than answers. Mei Ling smiled, and for a moment, the initial awkwardness evaporated. Their conversation flowed, starting with trivial comments about the city, then moving to more personal topics. Mei Ling's preferred music, the books Mr. Chen carried in his tote. But when the kopitiam's clock chimed 9 and the rain showed no signs of easing, the server approached with unexpected news. I'm sorry, folks, but we're closing. The storm has caused power outages in half the city, and there are no buses until morning. If you'd like, there's a guest house right next door. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean. Mei Ling and Mr. Chen exchanged glances, caught by the relentless circumstances. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach, but also a spark of curiosity. What was happening? Why did fate seem so determined to keep them together? It seems we don't have many alternatives, Mr. Chen said, rising and offering her a hand with her backpack. Care to join me? Mei Ling hesitated, but something within her, perhaps the same restlessness that had drawn her to Singapore, compelled her to nod. All right, but I still have the spray, she quipped, though her voice trembled slightly. Mr. Chen let out a hearty laugh, and together they stepped out of the kopitiam, into the persistent rain and whatever the night held in store. The rain continued its relentless descent upon Singapore's thoroughfares, transforming the pavements into miniature rivulets. Mei Ling and Mr. Chen walked closely beneath his umbrella, which barely shielded them both. The shophouse guest house the server had mentioned was merely steps away, a slender building with a faded sign proclaiming the Moonlight Retreat, its facade marked by peeling paint and a single flickering bulb. It didn't inspire much confidence, but options were scarce. Mei Ling tightened the strap of her backpack, acutely aware of her predicament. She was about to spend the night in an unfamiliar place with a man she had only just met. Her instincts urged caution, yet there was something about Mr. Chen that coaxed her to lower her guard, if only a fraction. They entered the foyer, which carried the scent of dampness and aged wax. A woman with her hair secured in a severe bun greeted them from behind a wooden counter. The lighting was dim, likely a consequence of the power disruption the server had mentioned. Good evening, the woman said, adjusting her spectacles. 2 rooms? Mr. Chen looked at Mei Ling, offering her the opportunity to decide. She hesitated, biting her lip. Her budget was tight, and the thought of spending on her own room made her uneasy. Besides, an internal impulse, perhaps curiosity or the sheer adrenaline of the situation, urged her not to separate from him just yet. "How much is a double room?" Mei Ling asked, surprising even herself. The woman raised an eyebrow but offered no comment. $15 per person, separate beds, breakfast included if the power returns tomorrow. Mr. Chen nodded, producing his wallet. "That's fine. Put it on my account. But separate beds, as she said." Mei Ling looked at him, a mix of gratitude and suspicion in her gaze. "You don't have to pay for me," she said, frowning. "I can manage my own way." "Relax. It's just for one night. Consider it my good deed for the day," he responded with a wink, handing the money to the woman. They ascended a narrow staircase to the second floor. The room was modest, with 2 single beds separated by a bedside table, an antique wardrobe, and a window overlooking the drenched street. Rain lashed against the pane with a constant rhythm, and a table lamp, powered by a generator, cast a warm but feeble glow. Mei Ling placed her backpack on one of the beds and sat, surveying her surroundings with a blend of unease and intrigue. "Are you always so trusting with strangers?" she inquired, removing her damp jacket and draping it over a chair back. Mr. Chen settled onto the other bed, retrieving his book from his tote and placing it carefully on the nightstand. "Not always. But there's something about you that doesn't make me feel you're a stranger," he said, looking at her with those gray eyes that seemed to perceive beyond the obvious. Mei Ling felt a blush creep up her cheeks and averted her gaze, pretending to adjust her backpack. "What strange things you say. You don't even know me." "Not yet," he replied with a smile that was more warm than teasing. "But the night is long, and it seems fate isn't quite ready to separate us." She let out a nervous laugh, not because the situation was humorous, but because she didn't know how to handle the intensity of his words. There was an enormous chasm between them. He, with his aura of having lived 1,000 lives. She, just beginning to uncover her own. Yet here they were, sharing a room in a quaint guest house, brought together by the rain and a phantom bus. "And what do you do when you're not stranded in guest houses with young women who could be your granddaughter?" Mei Ling asked, attempting to lighten the mood. Mr. Chen chuckled, leaning back against the headboard of the bed. "I read, I wander, I converse with people. Sometimes I write, though not as much as before. And you? What do you do besides escaping to Singapore without a plan?" Mei Ling shrugged, gazing at the rain through the window. "I don't know. I suppose I'm looking for something that makes me feel alive. In my Heartland estate, everything's the same coffee shops, the same faces. I wanted to see something different, but now I'm here, stranded with you. It could be worse," he said with a playful tone. "You could be alone at that bus stop, soaked to the bone." She smiled despite herself. There was something in the way Mr. Chen spoke, that blend of calm and mischief, that made her feel more at ease. Yet the awkwardness of the situation remained. 2 beds, 1 room, and an entire night ahead. She rose and went to the bathroom to change her wet clothes for a dry t-shirt and leggings. When she returned, Mr. Chen was looking out the window, hands in his pockets. "You know," he began without turning, "there's something special about stormy nights. Everything feels more real, as if the world pauses for a moment so you can truly think." Mei Ling sat on her bed, crossing her legs. "And what do you think about then?" Mr. Chen turned, leaning against the window frame. The lamplight cast soft shadows on his face, and for a moment, Mei Ling noticed how captivating he was, despite the wrinkles and silver hair. It wasn't just his appearance. It was the way he moved, as if he carried stories she could barely imagine. "I think about time," he said in a low voice, "about how it passes, what we leave behind, what we can still discover. And you? What do you think about when everything is silent?" Mei Ling remained quiet, surprised by the question. No one had ever asked her anything like that before. In her Heartland estate, conversations revolved around local gossip, regional news, or the daily grind. No one spoke of silence or what lay within oneself. "I don't know," she admitted, fidgeting with a loose thread on the quilt. "I suppose I think about what I want to be, whether I'll ever find something that makes me feel complete." Mr. Chen looked at her, and for an instant, the silence between them was more eloquent than any words. There was a subtle, yet undeniable connection, as if the storm had dissolved the barriers of the external world. Mei Ling felt a tingle on her skin, unsure if it was from the coolness or the intensity of his gaze. "Does sharing a room with me bother you?" he asked suddenly, his tone more curious than concerned. She shook her head, though her heart fluttered faintly. "No, I guess not. But it's strange, isn't it? You could be, I don't know, my grandfather." Mr. Chen chuckled, and this time it was a deep laugh that filled the room. "I could, but I'm not. And I don't believe you see me as such, do you?" Mei Ling didn't answer because she didn't know what to say. There was truth in his words, and it made her nervous. She got up, feigning a search for something in her backpack, just to break the moment. But when she looked at him again, he was still observing her with that calm that seemed to disarm her. "Shall we order some supper?" Mr. Chen suggested, changing the subject. "This guest house may not be the Fullerton, but I'm sure they have something to keep hunger at bay." "All right," she said, grateful for the distraction. "But no kacang putih. I can't stand them." Mr. Chen smiled, and as he dialed the reception on the antique phone on the bedside table, Mei Ling realized that for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. The night was just beginning, and though she couldn't explain it, something told her this storm had brought more than just rain into her life. The guesthouse room was immersed in an unusual calm, broken only by the patter of rain against the window and the occasional hum of the generator powering the lamp. Mei Ling and Mr. Chen had ordered some supper, a couple of kaya toast sandwiches, and 2 bottles of mineral water, the only provisions the guesthouse could offer during the blackout. They sat on the floor, on a blanket they found in the wardrobe, using the bedside table as a makeshift surface. The scene held a certain absurdity, as if they were 2 castaways sharing a meal on a deserted island. Mei Ling bit into her toast, glancing sideways at Mr. Chen. He ate with unhurried composure, a trait that both unnerved and fascinated her. In her Heartland estate, everyone always seemed to rush, though they weren't going anywhere in particular. But Mr. Chen, he was different. Every movement of his seemed deliberate, as if he knew precisely what he was doing. "Do you always eat so slowly?" she asked, breaking the silence. Mr. Chen looked up, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "When you reach my age, you learn to savor things. The food, the moments, everything." Mei Ling rolled her eyes, yet couldn't help but smile. "How profound. Is that in the 62-year-old manual?" He chuckled, setting aside his toast and wiping his hands with a serviette. "No. You learn that when life throws a few punches, making you pause and look around. Don't you ever have moments like that?" She shrugged, uncomfortable with the question. She wasn't accustomed to someone speaking to her as if her thoughts genuinely mattered. "I don't know. I suppose I don't think about it that much. Everyone in my Heartland estate is obsessed with the same things. Finding a job, getting married, having children. There isn't much room for savoring." Mr. Chen looked at her, and for a moment, his eyes seemed to penetrate her very being. "Well, here you are in Singapore, in a quaint guest house with an old man like me. That's already something different, isn't it?" Mei Ling let out a laugh, covering her mouth to avoid spitting out the water she had just sipped. "You're not that old." "Well, a little, but not like my grandfather, who only talks about his ailments and the price of fish." "Thank you for the compliment," he said, feigning a bow. "But seriously, Mei Ling, what brought you here? I don't buy that change of scenery excuse. There's something more, isn't there?" She fell silent, staring at her half-eaten toast. It wasn't the first time someone had asked her why she had left her Heartland estate, but it was the first time she felt the urge to respond with the truth. Perhaps it was the rain, or the intimacy of the room, or the way Mr. Chen listened, without judgment, without interruption. "I suppose I felt trapped," she admitted, her voice lower than she had expected. "My mother wants me to study something useful, like nursing or administration. My father just wants me to stay out of trouble. And my friends are all in their own bubbles, planning their lives as if they were already pre-written. I don't want that. I want, something bigger." Mr. Chen nodded, as if her words were no surprise. That something bigger is elusive. Sometimes it's not a place or a thing. Sometimes it's just a feeling. Have you ever felt it? Mei Ling pondered, watching the lamp flicker faintly. Once, at the beach at night. I was alone, looking at the sea. And for a moment I felt like everything made sense, as if the world was speaking to me. But then I went home, and it all faded. Mr. Chen smiled, but this time, there was a touch of melancholy in his expression. That feeling is pure gold. Most people chase it their entire lives. I felt it a few times when I was young, when I met someone special, when I wrote something that truly mattered. "You're a writer?" she asked, leaning forward, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "I was," he corrected, looking out the window. "I wrote a couple of novels years ago. Nothing that changed the world, but they made me feel alive. Then life got complicated, and well, I stopped writing." "Why?" Mei Ling asked, almost unaware of how close she now was to him, her legs crossed on the blanket. Mr. Chen sighed, running a hand through his beard. "Life, I suppose. Choices, mistakes, losses. Sometimes you tire of wrestling with words. But don't misunderstand me. I don't regret anything. Every scar tells a story." Mei Ling looked at him, fascinated. There was something in the way he spoke, in the way his hands moved as he recounted something, that made her want to know more. It wasn't just curiosity. It was as if he held the answers to questions she didn't even know she had. "And what do you want to leave behind?" he asked, returning the question. She laughed nervously, leaning back against the wall. "I don't know. Boredom. The feeling that I'm wasting my time. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to get trapped forever, like my mother, who always says she could have been something more." Mr. Chen looked at her, and this time his gaze was more intense, almost as if he could see into her soul. "You won't get trapped, Mei Ling. You're young, but you're not naive. You have fire within you. You just need to learn how to wield it." She felt a warmth in her chest, not only from his words but from the way he spoke them, as if he truly believed in her. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Not her parents, not her teachers, not her friends. She realized she was staring intently at him and averted her gaze, embarrassed. The rain continued to fall, but now the sound was almost hypnotic, like a song enveloping them. Mei Ling rose to open the window a crack, letting the fresh air in. The room filled with the scent of damp earth, and she inhaled deeply, feeling something stir within her. "Do you know what the best thing about storms is?" Mr. Chen said, approaching the window to look at the darkened street. "They cleanse everything, the air, the streets, our thoughts. It's as if they offer you a chance to begin anew." Mei Ling looked at him, standing beside her, and for the first time noticed their proximity, the warmth of his body, the faint scent of his cologne, the way his hands rested on the sill. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her want to draw closer, even if her mind screamed it was madness. "And do you need to begin anew?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mr. Chen turned his head, and for a moment, their eyes met. There was something raw in his gaze, something that spoke of years of life, of joys and sorrows she could only imagine. "We all need to begin anew sometime," he said, his voice so low it seemed to merge with the sound of the rain. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with possibilities. Mei Ling felt a tingle on her skin, a mix of nerves and something more, something she couldn't name. She took a step back, breaking the moment, and sat down again on the blanket. "You're strange, you know," she said, trying to lighten the mood. "You speak as if you know things I'll never understand." Mr. Chen chuckled, resuming his seat opposite her. "Give me a couple more hours and I'll tell you everything I know. But only if you tell me something about yourself." "Fair trade," Mei Ling smiled, and for the first time in a long while, she felt exactly where she was meant to be. The guest house room seemed to shrink with the passage of hours. The lamp still flickered, casting soft shadows on the walls, and the rain, though lighter, still whispered against the window. Mei Ling and Mr. Chen remained seated on the blanket on the floor, the remnants of their kaya toast forgotten on the bedside table. Their conversation had flowed effortlessly, leaping from trivial topics to deeper confessions, as if the storm had dissolved the barriers that would normally have kept them at a distance. Mei Ling leaned back against the wall, her legs stretched out on the blanket. There was something in Mr. Chen's voice, in his manner of telling stories, that made her feel as though she were watching a film. He had spoken of his travels through Southeast Asia in the 70s, of nights dancing in bars in Bangkok, of a fleeting love that left him heartbroken in Kuala Lumpur. In return, she had recounted her dreams of traveling, of composing songs, though she couldn't play any instrument, of escaping the monotony that seemed to await her in her heartland estate. "I've never talked so much with someone I just met," Mei Ling said, breaking a brief silence. Her fingers idly played with the edge of the blanket, and her eyes avoided his, as if she feared he would see too much. Mr. Chen smiled, resting an elbow on his knee. "That's the nature of nights like this. They compel you to pause, to truly see the person before you. And you, Mei Ling, you're easy to listen to." She felt a blush rise to her neck. She wasn't accustomed to compliments, much less from someone like him, who seemed to choose every word with care. There was something in his presence, in the calm he exuded, that made her feel safe, yet also vulnerable, as if he could read her better than she could read herself. "Are you always so charming?" she asked, her tone attempting to be teasing, but emerging softer than she intended. Mr. Chen chuckled, leaning slightly towards her. "Only when the company warrants it. And you? Are you always so distrustful? Or is it just with me?" Mei Ling let out a giggle, gently hitting his arm. "I'm not distrustful. Well, a little. But this is strange, isn't it? We're here, stranded, talking as if we've known each other our whole lives. And you? I don't know. You're not what I expected someone your age to be like. And what did you expect someone my age to be like?" he asked, arching an eyebrow with a playful glint in his eyes. "I don't know. More serious, more boring, like my father, who only talks about football and utility bills," she said, laughing. "You're different, as if you've lived 1,000 things and still want to live more." Mr. Chen looked at her, and for a moment, the air between them became charged with something new. It wasn't just the conversation or the shared laughter. It was the way their eyes met, the way the space between them seemed to shrink without either moving. Mei Ling felt a tingle on her skin, a mix of nerves and something deeper, something that made her want to draw closer and retreat at the same time. "You know what?" he said, his voice lower, almost a whisper. "Sometimes I think age doesn't matter as much as we believe. What matters is what you feel here." He touched his chest, just over his heart. "And what I see in you is someone who feels deeply, even if you don't yet know what to do with it." Mei Ling swallowed, feeling her heart beat faster. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with such a blend of sincerity and warmth. In her heartland estate, boys her age were awkward, more interested in showing off than in truly connecting. But Mr. Chen, he was a world apart, and though her mind screamed caution that this made no sense, her body seemed to have other ideas. The way he looked at her, with that quiet intensity, made her skin prickle. She suddenly stood up, as if needing to move to break the tension. She walked to the window, opening it a little further to let in the cool air. The rain had subsided, but the scent of damp earth still filled the room. Mr. Chen also rose, approaching her but maintaining a respectful distance. "Do I make you nervous?" he asked, his tone more curious than arrogant. Mei Ling turned, leaning against the sill. The lamplight cast shadows on Mr. Chen's face, highlighting the lines of his jaw, the gentle curve of his lips. He was attractive in a way she hadn't noticed at first. It wasn't just his appearance, it was the way he occupied space, with a confidence that didn't need to shout to be noticed. "A little," she admitted with a shy smile. "But it's not because of you. Well, yes it is, but not in a bad way. It's just that I don't know how to explain it. You make me think about things I don't usually think about." Mr. Chen took a step closer, and now they were only a meter apart. The air seemed to vibrate between them, charged with an electricity neither named. "And what are those things?" he asked, his voice low, almost intimate. Mei Ling felt a shiver, not from the cool air, but from his proximity. Her hands were centimeters from his on the sill, and for a moment, she imagined how it would feel to have them strong and warm against her skin. She shook her head, trying to clear those thoughts. "I don't know. Things like what I truly want, who I am. Those things that sound cliché, but you can't help but ask yourself when you're with someone like you." "Someone like me?" he repeated with a smile that was almost an invitation. "Someone who seems to know who he is," she said, looking into his eyes. "Someone who isn't afraid to be real." Mr. Chen didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took another step towards her, and now they were so close that Mei Ling could feel the warmth of his body. He didn't touch her, but he didn't need to. His presence was enough to make her heart pound fiercely. The rain continued to fall, a soft murmur that enveloped the room, and the lamp flickered, plunging them into momentary dimness. "Mei Ling," he said, and the way he pronounced her name made something within her melt. "You don't have to have all the answers now. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that moments like this, the ones that make you feel alive, don't come often. Don't let them pass you by out of fear." She looked at him, her breath caught in her throat. There was something in his words, in the way he looked at her, that made her feel exposed, yet also protected. She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she raised a hand almost without thinking and brushed against the sleeve of his shirt. A small gesture, yet laden with intention. Mr. Chen didn't move, but his eyes darkened as if he were fighting something within himself. "You're dangerous, you know that?" he said with a low chuckle that resonated in Mei Ling's chest. "Me?" she asked, feigning indignation, though her voice trembled slightly. "You're the one who talks as if you want to convince me of something." "Perhaps," he admitted, leaning in a little closer until their faces were only a few centimeters apart. "But only if you want it to." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the steady rhythm of the rain. Mei Ling felt the world stop, as if only the two of them existed in that room, on that night. She didn't know what to do, but she also didn't want that moment to end. The guest house room was bathed in a soft twilight, the lamp flickering as if breathing in sync with the rain, which now fell with a slow, almost melodic cadence. Mei Ling and Mr. Chen remained by the window, so close that the space between them seemed to vibrate with an energy neither dared to name. The lingering touch of Mei Ling's hand on Mr. Chen's sleeve still hovered in the air, a small gesture laden with significance. Her heart hammered in her throat, and though her mind whispered that she should retreat, her body seemed anchored to the spot, drawn by his presence. Mr. Chen looked at her, his gray eyes shining in the faint light. And for a moment, the outside world, the rain, Singapore, the guest house, seemed to fade away. "I don't know what you're doing to me, Mei Ling," he said, his voice low, resonating in her chest. "But I'm not complaining." She let out a nervous chuckle, turning her gaze towards the window to hide the flush that crept up her cheeks. "I'm not doing anything," she replied, trying to sound casual, though her voice trembled slightly. "We're just here, talking like normal people." "Normal," he repeated with a smile that was half tease, half tenderness. "There's nothing normal about this, and you know it." Mei Ling looked at him again, and this time, she didn't avert her gaze. There was something in the way he observed her, with a mix of respect and desire, that made her feel powerful and vulnerable simultaneously. She had never been in a situation like this, trapped in a room with a man over 40 years her senior, yet she felt no fear. There was something in Mr. Chen, in his calm, in the way he seemed to truly see her, that made her want to explore this connection, even if she didn't fully comprehend what she was feeling. "Why don't you scare me?" she asked, almost without thinking, her voice barely a whisper. Mr. Chen tilted his head as if the question had surprised him. Then, slowly, he raised a hand and brought it close to her face, pausing a few centimeters away. "Do you want me to scare you?" he asked, his tone more serious than she expected. She shook her head, feeling the air grow denser. "No, just... I don't understand why I feel this way with you. I shouldn't, right? You're older. I don't know what I'm doing." Mr. Chen lowered his hand but didn't move away. Instead, he stepped a little closer until their knees almost touched. The rain continued to fall, a backdrop that made the room feel like a sanctuary from the world. "There's no should in these matters, Mei Ling," he said, with a softness that contrasted with the intensity of his gaze. "What you feel is what matters, and if you feel good here with me, then there's nothing wrong with that." She swallowed, feeling her heart pound so fiercely he must surely be hearing it. There was something in his words, in the way he spoke them, that made her want to cross that invisible line between them. Without thinking, she took another step closer until their hands brushed against the sill. The contact was brief, but enough to send a shiver down her spine. "And you?" she asked, her voice braver than she felt. "What do you feel?" Mr. Chen looked at her, and for an instant it seemed he was about to say something profound, something that would change everything. But instead, he smiled. A slow, warm smile that made Mei Ling's stomach flutter. "I feel that this night is a gift," he said. And his hand moved, brushing hers with a delicacy that was almost unbearable. "And that you are a surprise I didn't expect." Mei Ling felt the world stop. The room, the rain, the flickering lamp, everything faded, and only the warmth of his hand against hers remained. Without knowing who moved first, their faces drew closer, and suddenly their lips met in a tentative kiss, as if both were testing the waters. It was brief, but enough to make Mei Ling's heart race. She pulled back, her breath ragged, looking at Mr. Chen as if seeing him for the first time. This shouldn't be happening," she said, though she didn't sound convinced. Mr. Chen didn't move, but his eyes never left hers. "Do you want me to stop?" he asked with a calm that disarmed her. She shook her head, almost without realizing it. She didn't want him to stop. She wanted more, though she didn't understand why. There was something about him, in the way he looked at her, in the way his presence filled the room, that made her feel alive in a way she had never experienced. "No," she whispered. And this time, it was she who leaned in, kissing him again, this time with more assurance. Her hands found his shoulders, firm beneath his linen shirt, and Mr. Chen's hands settled on her waist with a delicacy that contrasted with the intensity of the moment. The rain continued to fall, and the lamp flickered once more, casting the room in a warm dimness. They moved towards one of the beds unhurriedly, as if wanting to savor every second. There was no urgency, only a connection that grew with each touch, each gaze. Mr. Chen's hands traced Mei Ling's back, warm and secure, while she surrendered to the sensation of his skin, to the warmth that emanated from him. It wasn't just desire, it was something deeper, a need to feel close, to erase the distance the world imposed between them. They lay on the bed, their clothes still on. But the intimacy of the moment was overwhelming. Mei Ling felt the weight of his body beside her, the warmth of his breath on her neck, and for a moment, everything else, their ages, her doubts, the outside world, disappeared. Only they remained, enveloped in the sound of the rain and the soft light that embraced them. "I don't want you to think I'm taking advantage of you," Mr. Chen said, pulling back slightly to look into her eyes. His voice was serious, but his hands remained on her waist as if he didn't want to let go. "I don't think that," she replied, with a sincerity that surprised even herself. "I am choosing this." He smiled, and that smile was enough to make her feel she had made the right decision. They kissed again, more slowly, letting the moment linger. The rain continued to fall, a murmur that seemed to accompany their heartbeats, and the room filled with a calm that was almost sacred. When they finally parted, they lay there side by side, staring at the ceiling. Mei Ling felt something within her had shifted, as if she had crossed a threshold she didn't know existed. It wasn't just the kiss or the physical closeness. It was the feeling of being seen, of being understood, of sharing something that transcended words. "Are you all right?" Mr. Chen asked, turning to look at her. She nodded with a shy smile. "More than all right," she said, and then added with a touch of humor, "though I still think you're a little strange." He chuckled, and the sound filled the room, breaking the tension. They lay there, talking in low voices, sharing laughs and small touches, until tiredness began to weigh on them. The night enveloped them, and though neither said it, both knew that this moment, this connection, was something neither would ever forget. The first light of dawn filtered through the thin curtains of the moonlight retreat, bathing the room in a soft golden hue. The rain had ceased during the night, leaving behind a silence that seemed to amplify every small sound. The creak of the floorboards, the faint hum of the city stirring, the rustle of the sheets as Mei Ling moved in the bed. She had been awake for a while, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, trying to decipher the feelings swirling in her chest. Beside her, Mr. Chen slept peacefully, one arm resting over his stomach, his face relaxed, as if the previous night hadn't shifted their world. Mei Ling turned her head to look at him. In the dimness of the night, everything had seemed possible, as if the rules of the outside world didn't apply. But now, with daylight filtering into the room, reality began to seep in too. She was 18, he was 62. The age difference that had seemed irrelevant in the dark now felt like a weight in her mind. Yet there was no regret. What had transpired between them, the kisses, the touches, the intimacy of their entwined bodies, didn't feel like a mistake, but rather something that needed to happen. She rose carefully, trying not to make a sound, and went to the bathroom to wash her face. The mirror reflected an image she didn't entirely recognize. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes shone with a mix of confusion and clarity. She felt different, as if she had aged years in a single night. It wasn't just the physical aspect, it was the way Mr. Chen had listened to her. He had challenged her to think about who she was and what she wanted. For the first time, she felt that someone saw her potential, not just her youth or her nascent errors. When she returned to the room, Mr. Chen was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, his hair disheveled, his shirt slightly wrinkled. He looked at her with a soft smile, without a trace of discomfort. "Good morning," he said with that deep voice that still made Mei Ling's stomach flutter. "Did you sleep well?" She sat on her bed opposite him, crossing her legs. "More or less," My mind won't stop spinning. Mr. Chen nodded, as if he understood exactly what she meant. That's what happens after a night like this. Everything seems grander than it is. Mei Ling looked at him, searching his face for any sign of what he was feeling. Was he as bewildered as she? Or was this just a fleeting adventure for him? A brief interlude in his life? The thought pained her more than she expected. And you? She asked, her tone attempting to be light, but coming out more serious. What are you thinking right now? Mr. Chen leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His eyes met hers, and there was a warmth in them that made her feel secure despite everything. I'm thinking that last night was special, he said, not averting his gaze. Not just because of, well, what happened, but because you reminded me what it's like to feel alive at my age. Sometimes you believe there are no more surprises, and then you arrive with your fire and your questions, and you make me question everything. Mei Ling felt a knot in her throat. His words were so sincere, so raw, that she didn't know how to respond. She wanted to ask him what that meant, what would happen now, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she rose and went to the window, opening it to let in the fresh morning air. Singapore was awakening. The distant chime from a place of worship, the murmur of the first vehicles, the aroma of kopi rising from a nearby kopitiam. What do we do now? She asked without turning, her voice more vulnerable than she intended. Mr. Chen rose and approached her, stopping beside her but not touching her. What do you want to do? He asked, with a softness that compelled her to look at him. I don't know, she admitted, turning to face him. All of this, you and I this night, I don't know how it fits into my life. I don't know if I should feel bad or happy or lost. Mr. Chen smiled, and this time there was something paternal in his expression, though not in a way that made her feel small. You don't have to understand everything now, Mei Ling. Sometimes the most important things in life don't fit anywhere. They just happen, and they change you, and you carry on with that inside you. She looked at him, searching his words for clarity, but instead of clarity she found something better. Acceptance. Mr. Chen wasn't judging her. He wasn't pressuring her to define what they had shared. He was simply there, with her, in that moment. Do you ever regret anything? She asked with a curiosity that bordered on admiration. Mr. Chen chuckled, running a hand through his silver hair. Oh, I regret many things, but not last night, nor meeting you. That I will always cherish. Mei Ling felt her eyes well up, but she forced a smile. You're too good with words, you know. You'll make me cry like a silly girl. He chuckled, and this time he took her hand, a simple gesture, yet full of warmth. Don't cry. Let's go for breakfast instead. I believe they promised us something if the power had returned. They descended to the guest house dining area, a small space with wooden tables and the welcoming aroma of toasted bread. The woman at the counter with her tight bun served them kopi and kaya toast with soft-boiled eggs. They ate in silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was as if both were processing the night, allowing their feelings to settle. Will you come back to Singapore? Mei Ling asked as she buttered her toast, trying to sound casual. Mr. Chen took a pensive sip of his kopi. Perhaps. This city-state always has something to offer. And what will you do now? She shrugged, looking out the window at the street that was beginning to fill with life. I don't know. Go home, I suppose, but I don't want everything to go back to how it was. I want to take something from this night, though I don't know what it is. Mr. Chen looked at her, and for a moment it seemed he was about to say something significant, but instead, he simply nodded, as if trusting that she would find the answers herself. When they finished breakfast, they gathered their belongings and left the guest house. The city was damp but bright under the morning sun. They stopped on the pavement in front of the building, and for a moment, neither knew what to say. "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Mei Ling said finally, her voice trembling. "For everything." He smiled, and this time it was a smile that held 1,000 unspoken things. "Thank you, Mei Ling. Take care, and never stop seeking that something bigger." They shared a brief, warm embrace, and then each went their separate ways. Mei Ling turned once to watch him, seeing his figure recede down the street with his book in hand and a tranquil stride. She didn't know if they would ever meet again, but something told her that that night, that connection, would always accompany her. Mei Ling walked through the streets of Singapore with her backpack slung over her shoulder, the fresh morning air caressing her face. The city was alive. The bustle of Kopitiam's opening, the distant chime from a place of worship, the aroma of freshly fried yuqiao drifting in the air. But within her, everything was calmer, as if the previous night's storm had left a clean space in her soul. The farewell with Mr. Chen, though brief, had been sufficient. They hadn't exchanged numbers or promises to meet again. There was something in that absence of ties that made what they had lived feel even more valuable. She paused at the Marina Barrage, sitting on one of the benches that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. The sun shone brightly, reflecting on the water, and Mei Ling closed her eyes, letting the memories of the night settle. Mr. Chen's laughter, his deep voice recounting stories, the warmth of his hands, the kiss that had been like a bridge between two worlds. All of it remained vibrant within her, but now she saw it with new clarity. It wasn't just an adventure or a whim. It was an encounter that had revealed a part of herself she didn't know existed. "What happened to you?" she whispered, repeating the words that gave title to that night. The question resonated in her head, not with confusion, but with curiosity. What had happened to her? She had met someone who, in a few hours, had given her more questions than answers, more life than certainties, and somehow, that was exactly what she needed. She took a notebook from her backpack, one she hadn't touched for months, and began to write. They weren't songs or poetry, just loose thoughts, fragments of what she felt. "Mr. Chen told me that moments that make you feel alive don't come often. I think last night was one of those. I don't know if I'll see him again, but I know I don't want to forget how he made me feel. Brave, seen, free." She closed the notebook, feeling a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Meanwhile, a few streets away, Mr. Chen walked towards the MRT station with his canvas tote slung over his shoulder and his book in hand. His stride was tranquil, as always, but there was a lightness in it that hadn't been there the day before. Mei Ling had been a surprise, a reminder that life, even at 62, could still be unpredictable. He hadn't expected to connect with someone so young, so full of doubts and fire at the same time. But they had, and not just in a physical sense. It had been a connection of souls, of two people who, for one night, had found themselves in the same place, searching for something that perhaps even they themselves couldn't name. He stopped at a kopitiam, ordered a kopi, and sat by the window. As he watched the passers-by, he thought about what he had told Mei Ling, that important moments don't always fit into life, but they change you. He too felt changed. It wasn't love, not in the classic sense. It was something purer, more ephemeral, yet equally real. He took a small notebook from his bag and wrote a line. "Yesterday, an 18-year-old girl reminded me that the heart does not age." He smiled, closed the notebook, and took a sip of his coffee. Back at the Marina Barrage, Mei Ling rose, determined to make the most of the day. She wanted to walk through the Tiong Bahru district, get lost in its narrow streets, perhaps buy a new notebook to continue writing. But before she left, she allowed herself one last thought about Mr. Chen. She didn't know where he would be now, or if their paths would ever cross again, but it didn't matter. What they had shared didn't need a future to make sense. It had been a gift, as he said, and she would carry it with her like a spark that would guide her in the days to come. The lesson of that night wasn't just about them. It was about connection, or something akin to it, and how it doesn't always conform to the rules the world imposes. Age, expectations, differences, all of that faded when two people truly found each other, when they allowed themselves to be vulnerable, to be real. Mei Ling realized that connection, in all its forms, was not limited by time, nor by years, nor by conventions. It was a force that could emerge at a bus stop, in a humble guest house, on a stormy night, and leave an indelible mark. As she walked towards the Alkaf Bridge with the sun warming her skin, Mei Ling smiled. She didn't know what would come next, but for the first time, that didn't scare her. She felt larger, stronger, more herself, and though the question, "What happened to you?" still resonated, now she had an answer. "I found myself,"